I'm Shane Nyland, and my co-host is Blake Musser. And these stories you're about to hear are from Weapons Company, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, 1st Marine Division, about the events surrounding and directly from the mouths of the people who were in Ramadi, 2004. Can you say your name and what platoon you're in?
Oh, yeah. So Felix Garcia, sergeant at the time, Rainmaker platoon, part of the 81 Mike for Weapons Company, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, first Marine.
Hoorah.
Well, I should probably say that I really contemplated on drinking like 4 beers before this podcast started. You know, like you had mentioned earlier, it doesn't feel right to talk through it like this. But reading, the unremitting, I got that word right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Unremitting. Yep.
Oh, unremitting. So I picked it up and man, I swallowed it. I didn't read it. I listened to the audiobook during drives.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, that's how I consumed it. And just all the pieces, right? So like the naval piece, the army piece, the political piece, the bigger thinking kind of put all these things together for me, where I didn't feel embarrassed, because I felt embarrassed for like a very long time. And I think part of it, so after listening to the book, I really tried to internalize how or why I felt the way that I felt. And I think it's because once we got back from Iraq, well, during our deployment to Ramadi, and I don't remember how it came about, but my next duty station was coming up, and I was concerned that I was going to be tagged for a B billet. And as you guys know, I'm not a huge talker. I'm a huge doer.
Yeah.
And I can think of processes, okay, and I can, speak to the processes, but like big crowds and conversations and hanging out was never really my thing. So I did not want to be recruited. And I felt that if I was a recruiter, I'd get, bad fitness report, and, then my career would be over. So I chose to join the drill field. So once we got back from Iraq, I went straight on leave and never came back to 2-4. So there was no debriefing for me, in any sense of the word. And I went from a high stressful environment to another high stressful environment, where the drill instructor school at that time was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. And I thought, being in Ramadi was bad.
What date did you report to drill instructor school? That is a crazy transition.
Yeah. So we got back in September, right?
Yes.
Yep. And I was in Paris Island in October.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah, so it was 30 days of leave, and then I reported straight to be a drill instructor at Paris Island. And I killed it. I did a great job there. But I found myself on more than one occasion, leaving the recruits, going to the bar, drinking myself to oblivion, passing out in a car. And I've never said this out loud. Passing out in the car, and I'd switch back into camis, and I would get back on the boys. And thinking through that, I think it was PTSD, depression. It's not like there's a huge amount of friends. You're on the boys 16 hours a day, 3 months at a time. So this book really opened it up for me a little bit on why I felt the way that I felt. So when you guys had asked, and I was like, yeah, I'm ready. I attended my first reunion this last year.
Yeah.
And I bought a shirt, I bought swag. I've never worn it until after digging into this book, and it's not something to be ashamed of, and it's worth talking about. Especially when they talked about the suicide rates and how the Lionesses couldn't get, treatment or weren't recognized for, being in combat, so on and so forth. I just knew that I wasn't alone. So
Speaking
that's
of the
Okay.
lionesses, do you remember any of the lionesses that went out with you?
yeah, I don't know them personally, but I do remember having that group with us. And I had read somewhere how you know one of the female Marines got left behind and stuff like that, and that kind of hurt a little bit because that's not how we operate and we should operate. But that's it, and that's the extent of it. I didn't do a lot of face to face interactions.
Sure, sure. I remember going over in the first part of like trying to find a couple of the females that were interested in helping out, and some of them came out and decided that wasn't for them, but we ended up with one that
Right.
was really solid. She was a staff sergeant.
Mm.
And then I was telling Nyland earlier that I found a book that came out in like 2009, 10 or something like that. It's called Women on the Front Line, and she was a army officer
Mm.
that got out, then came back in and was doing kind of an analysis of like, can women be on the front line?
Sure.
And one of the parts that I kind of took some pride in is that there's a chapter actually about us because we were her frontline experience. And I actually kind of vaguely remember her, but nevertheless, what she wrote in there was that the safest that she ever felt as far as like being like her body being safe inside of the military was when she was with 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, because
Wow.
we were so focused on our mission that as long as, I think I should find the exact quotation, but it's something to the effect of is that we didn't care as long as you're shooting in the right direction. Like
Yeah.
we don't care who you are.
Yeah.
And so, no, the larger lioness, part is something that I'm glad that that's being talked about more, I guess, because I was really, really proud of what we were able to help out with, and they then more specifically were helping us with when we were dealing with the women. So
Yeah. And that program started because I remember those issues with the whole cultural piece of men being in the same room with women, and
yep,
that's how that kind of transformed and morphed into, and then inadvertently ended up then being in combat when things got hairy.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a couple times. That's one of the reasons why a couple of them decided not to, is we got ambushed, and not that they didn't do what they needed to do by any means, but definitely afterwards we're like, you know what? I'll stay in
Yeah.
Junction City.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
My only big memory of them, because I never had, similar to you, Felix, I never had any significant interaction with them in the field. But when they came out with us, we would bring them over to Hurricane Point hours, sometimes 12 hours prior to the mission, because we didn't want to telegraph the mission or what. I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking,
Sure.
but there was no place for them to hang out, which made it weird, right? You don't want to bring them into our living area because that's was kind of inappropriate. They're from a different unit. They're also a different gender. And so there was a lot of like thought, like, don't bring them there. So where they always stuck them was where we had those two nasty couches and that TV in the headquarters shed. Do you remember our weird
Oh,
little MWR 8 foot by 8 foot
Yeah.
room?
Mm-hmm.
And they would be in there. And I remember walking in, that staff sergeant that you mentioned. This is the only reason why this memory even popped up. She was in there and she was pretty tall and pretty funny. Just her demeanor, she was always telling jokes. And she was like, "Hey, we're about to put on Full Metal Jacket. Do you want to watch it?" And I was like, "I'm a Marine. I don't think I'm allowed to say no to that." Yeah. And so they started watching Full Metal Jacket, and I think I watched 7 minutes before I had to go do something else.
Yeah.
But they were all super awesome. It was great that they were, you know, so able to integrate into our goofy ass platoons because all of us had our own personality quirks, and they
Yeah.
integrated right on in and just jumped in a seat and I never heard anything bad, never saw anything bad. I just never had them in my truck.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
So you were kind of mentioning that you felt embarrassed, and that's not a word that I hear out of very many Marines' mouths, but I'm curious if you're willing to expand on that. And then I have my own personal comment just on the same side of that. I've never felt embarrassed. What I have felt for 20 years is that I can't talk to anybody really about it. And it's not so much embarrassment. I just don't think anybody else would understand. And so I've kept it inside mostly.
Yes, yes. And I think the choice of words comes from, because there's different aspects of combat, right? Like you have um you know the the fighting spirit, right? You have when it's a contact, right, you're pushing towards fire.
Sure.
When you come to a crossing, everybody has their processes, and they're checking and adjusting, and the ID goes off, you're pushing through the kill zone and then dismounting them. There's a lot of heroic, automatic responses to things that happen, and that's something to be very prideful about.
Yeah, I mean, that shows your training.
Right. And but you also, I was a section leader, first section leader. So I also saw a lot of Marines in very, stripped situations where they were, in the thick of it, and, couldn't get their stuff together, and other Marines had to come in and, slap them or push them or tug them or yank them or pull them, hey, get your head back on, we're in it, let's, so a lot of that, right? So, and that's where the embarrassing piece, I think, comes from, that when somebody thinks of combat, oh, you were in a combat, oh, you were combat, oh, let's talk about, there's also that aspect of, yeah, but, it wasn't all rah, rah, rah all the time, especially towards the end of the deployment, where, you go into combat with this gung-ho attitude where, I'm going to kill, let somebody, pipe up, I'm
right
to the head type scenario.
Yeah.
And then as the deployment progressed, you saw a lot of self-preservation out of people. Hey, we got one month left, and we've had a high KIA, and we're in an action type. So Marines weren't 100% of the times 100% in it. And I saw a lot of that too. So from my sense of the embarrassment was that it's not a very boastful situation, and then I've heard of other platoons in the company not doing what they're supposed to be doing. I never saw that, but I remember having a conversation. Somebody called me over, and I think it was an officer or something, that there was this kid, and I don't remember his name, but he's from a different platoon, and he wouldn't go out with this section.
I do remember who you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah. And young kid too. I think he's, a very young Marine.
Yep.
Maybe at boot camp or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know him from Adam. And somebody had said, hey, I need to go talk to him. You do really good, influencing people. So go talk to him. And so we chatted for a while, and he's crying. Really in his feels about not going back out, because he wasn't really interested in doing what he thought should be done. So and it hasn't been to this last year and a half, 2 years where I found my faith. But I've always believed in a higher power. I've always, I'm, there's something bigger than me. Like there's life, there's something bigger than all of us. And I brought that into the conversation, and I was like, I don't believe that, that God put us here, just to put us here. There's a direction in life that you can choose to go off the path, whether it's left or right. And there's choices where you can stay on the path. And as long as you feel like you need to be on the path, God is going to direct you on that path, as difficult as it might be. And as I was talking about God, and I'm getting goosebumps talking about it, this huge wind from out of nowhere comes and just blows this door open, like the back hooch door, just blows it open. And I'm like, see, that's a sign, right? You don't have to do anything that you don't want to do, right? You have a choice, right? So just make the right choice. But in the thick of it, you're going to have your brother to the left or right that might need you at that particular time, right? So for no other reason, you at least at the minimum, you need to go out there and stand toe to toe with your brothers in arms when stuff, when shit hits the fan.
I
And that's
cannot remember that Marine's name. He was from Mobile Assault Platoon 3.
No,
And I can see his face in my head, and I could not tell you his name,
a
but
beautiful young guy.
uh-huh. And
I
I
actually go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, no,
Well,
no.
what I was going to say was Flex is that was that's actually one of my notes of one of the things that I was going to bring up was I actually remember you being asked to talk to that guy, and I also remember you talking to more than that individual Marine.
Mm.
And it's one of the things that like when I think about you, it's one of the things that I think about is how good you were with the Marines, with the junior Marines, and giving and being that uh there was a you had a strong sense of what needs to be done, and you were open to hearing and communicating. And that was Nyland and I have joked about this. Well, he has said it a couple times, but just that the 81s the 81 culture is a little bit different inside of the larger weapons company due to for a variety of different reasons. We tend to
Right.
yell a little bit more and tend to be a little bit more very structured.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I always had a hard time because I'm not a yeller. I was never a yeller. And so I was constantly pushed to do that. And when we were in, Nyland would often uh, say something to me, be like, "Don't let them get to you. This
Yeah.
isn't. That's not your leadership style. Don't
Yeah.
do it."
Well, dude,
Yeah.
And
my
you and go ahead. I was just my end of it is that Flex, you when you came on board though. So this was after I had picked up Corporal. Like when you came on board, I was finally being able to say like, "There, see, I can be like I don't have to yell. I
Yeah.
can be I can be a space for these Marines." And I ended up being that for Sledgehammer, where I ended up getting pushed some of the Marines that maybe needed, did not respond as well to getting yelled at. And
Right.
so could work with them more. But my biggest memory of you, especially over there, is you talking to that Marine and a couple others of just getting their heads screwed on straight
Right.
and allowing them to function as best as they could over there. Because I mean, if he would have refused to, go further, I mean, that would have escalated. And so
Right.
you
Yes.
saved a lot of heartache
Yes.
by being the person you are. So
yeah, that young man. Again,
I
I
think I
will.
remember who it is, but I'm refraining from saying their name just because it's I don't want to embarrass
Yeah,
somebody if they listen. So
yeah.
If if
I can't
if
remember his
they
name,
listen
but
to the
I was
podcast,
also asked to talk to him as well, and so I remember that. But he only remained with headquarters for maybe 3 4 weeks.
mm,
And I think he went to talk to you again or something. He talked to someone else again. And then he went back to map 3 and finished the rest of the deployment and never had any other issues. And he contacted me probably 10 years ago, years later through social media, and he apologized to me weirdly, and I wasn't even in his platoon about everything. And he said he was going to go through and apologize to everybody. I was like, you have literally nothing to apologize for. You
100%.
did nothing wrong.
That's right.
It, it was a surreal moment. I hope he is doing well.
Yeah, same here. And that's what I was going to say. If he ever comes across this podcast, I have nothing but respect for this young man to grab hold
Right.
and own it. That's a big deal,
Right.
especially in this type of environment. When you're trying to self-preserve yourself, to go against that, that's huge.
Well, he could have done
but
worse too. He could have went outside the wire and in his head he wasn't going to fight instead of saying it out loud and letting everybody know that, hey, I can't do this. He could have
Right.
went outside the wire and then just crumpled up in a ball out there in the field somewhere, and then he would have been a liability.
Right.
And so this was a better choice, realistically, and a very mature choice, though at the time I doubt he thought it was that way. And probably many people didn't treat him that way. That
yeah.
was a very smart choice.
Something that Nyland and I noticed when we were reading the book and that kind of like struck, at least let me just speak for myself, that struck one of the biggest things that struck me reading Unremitting was being reminded how young all of us were. And I was just having this, I just visited a very close friend of mine just the weekend. We've been friends since kindergarten. So he's been with me this entire weird journey. And this topic of the podcast and the book and everything came up, and something that he brought up also in that made me go, oh wow, is, you know, like I'll just use myself for example. I barely graduated from high school. I'm from Northwest Illinois. The number of people of different cultures that I had talked to prior to joining the Marine Corps was, could count on one hand.
Right.
And we're being asked to do a job that for millennia hasn't been able to be figured out by the top people that have devoted their entire life to this. And I think going back to your comment about being, embarrassed, which I appreciate that maybe you're reprocessing that word. We were being asked to do something very unfair. Like the amount of responsibility that I think that we, especially as Marines, we take on a lot of responsibility. And so, but we do have to give ourselves a break. When now that I'm in my 40s, I think about, 22, like I look at a 22-year-old and it's like, man, we were trusting you to do these really we didn't, like when we got sent over there, we didn't have, we had to make up our, another one of my big memories is running some of those drills that we were you would run. I love you for it because we would run those drills in Camp Victory before we left the LOD. Just like we didn't know what we were doing, but at least you were pushing the training, giving Marines the confidence that we might not know what's next, but we're going to train what we do know, so we'll be ready. And because I know people were starting to get a little worried that it was like we don't know,
what drills
what to expect.
I know what we did, but what drills did you guys run?
So I remember towards the end of our training before going to Iraq, there was a huge push towards occupying towns, and it's a tactic that we used in Vietnam, where the locals would befriend, or not the locals, the occupying force, I guess, would befriend the locals and kind of help in that sense. So, and it was weird because there was no talk of that until like a month before deploying.
Right.
And in my mind, I was like, well, what are we really planning to get involved in? So I did some research, I read some books, try to, spin up on what the holistic thought process was behind that. And then we got to Camp Victory and we got some training from the British Special Forces, I believe.
Yes.
Around satellite training or satellite patrolling.
Yes.
So that's what I worked on. So
interestingly, it was the Scottish Dragoons very specifically, and the British SAS. Yeah.
Yep, SAS. Yep. And so I put two and two together. I was like, okay, so the command is kind of giving us some insight that, hey, we might be left alone or very limited resources to execute whatever mission that we had. And then we had this new style of patrolling that was not linear. So I relied heavily on, the very efficient and self-sustained work groups within that piece. And that's why I kept pushing that, expecting that at some point we were going to be in the thick of it with no resources. And we, need to be prepared as play as many scenarios as we can to be as successful as we can.
Do you remember what you read? And that actually, just you saying that, I'm very curious because I read a couple of books too. I was very much cerebral as far as that went, preparing for war and hoping that I could disseminate knowledge. That was the goal.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah,
what did you read?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It was a small, because you gave it to me, and I got a copy of it. It was like small unit warfare.
Right. Yeah,
it was a gray book with a red line on the back.
Yeah, and it was a very short read, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't like it wasn't a huge,
Yeah, but anything. Just the fact that as a sergeant, and you said you were a section leader, to take that on yourself to do something that essentially is really an officer's job and disseminate that to Marines is unique. and impressive in and of itself. And I was that was interesting to me that you ran drills yourself, because that was the kind of crap I also tried to do for the same thing.
Right.
Because I didn't think anybody was preparing us for anything.
Right. Yeah, it was a shot in the dark for sure. I think I read a question here. So off that podcast sheet that I want to talk about.
Sure.
There was this point where an ID went off or something, or somebody got shot, or it was our first, interaction, and it wasn't weapons platoon. It was, probably, combat outposts, like out there. And I really internalized it. I was like, man, it was IDs. It had to be IDs. But I remember journaling. So, 'cause, as a section leader, you can't really articulate how you feel, right? You got to be the strongest you can for everyone around you. So I would journal sometimes, and then I would also call my girlfriends, plural, to kind of walk through some of the emotions I was going through.
We'll come back to that here in a few minutes.
And when I remember a turning point in my thought process, and I think I got the journal around the house somewhere, but it was something along the lines that if an IED goes off, I either made it or didn't make it. Right?
Yep. Yeah.
So I shouldn't be afraid when something, huge happens. If anything, I need to act.
Mm-hmm.
And I carried that and trained, and the team to that thought process. And I was like ready to die, like at any point, even on our last day of Iraq. One time specifically, we were, it was towards the end of the deployment, and we were doing patrols throughout the city, and we ended up at this intersection. And there's a lot of fear going on, right? Because the April shindigs and and the mass casualties and stuff. So we're hopping across an intersection, and one of my Marines wouldn't post up and protect down the alleyway or whatever it was, or the streetway. And I kept grabbing him. I'm like, hey, we got to go. You got to post up. You got to post up right here, because if you don't post up, it's the same shit, right? Like, hey, your area of operation during this crossing is this corner. This is what you need to be. And he wouldn't do it. He was scared shitless for obvious reasons. And I was like, all right, fuck it. So I stood in the middle of the intersection with my hands in my pocket. And I'm like, you're either going to post up and take your post, or we're just going to wait for somebody to shoot me. But you're going to do your fucking job. It's going to happen. And after, some heated words and conversations, he finally took his post. But that was, based on that initial thought process of, it's either going to happen or not going to happen. Yeah, and that was hard. Keeping everybody in line mentally was probably the hardest thing I did while in Iraq.
The burden of command and burden of leadership is very real. I think that is also something that is underrepresented. I think, I don't know, you and I are pretty close to the same age. And so you grew up with the pinnacle of Vietnam movies and all that crap in the 80s and 90s and all that. And so there was some movies that got down to that, where there was leaders who were really stressing their decisions. Everything wasn't Rambo. Some of the movies actually did really good at that. And I don't think there is a modern version of that right now for the global war on terror, because now we're 20 years out from some of the biggest battles of the global war on terror. And people don't talk about that enough, about how much that weighs on you as a small unit leader, especially, that you're looking your friend in the eye, and you might have been playing cards a minute ago, and now you're, as you just said, standing in an intersection where very frequently people were just popping around corners and firing weapons. And you were like, look, I'll show you. I'm not scared. You can stand on that corner. And how hard that is on you specifically to be like, well, that's fine. I'm going to gamble my life so that way everybody else will do what they're supposed to do.
100%.
Yeah, that and you, again, you're thinking about this moment 20 years later, and I imagine it weighs on you now just the same as it did then, where you're like, damn, that was a dumb choice.
Yeah.
Personally, but it did the right thing at the time, and it kept everybody going and kept everybody alive.
Yeah. It was, it's about holding people accountable.
Mm-hmm.
You have one person not doing their job and you think that your six is covered and it's not covered. And there goes, a young 18-year-old, 21-year-old, with newborn kids that they've never seen because some jackass in the back and doesn't want to do his job.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's not, it's unsatisfactory.
Some of in the other, especially when we were talking with Jordan and Nyland, and I talked about this extensively, and we've kind of already touched on it a little bit here too, but it is absolutely wild to think about in the historical perspective that when we went over there, how new everything was. I mean, we went over, we didn't have the armor. When we went over there, we didn't have tactics. When we went over there, we didn't even understand. I mean, I don't know if you remember the weird little slide deck presentation that we got on what IADs are, and them saying that we needed to have like a 200-foot offset if a soda can was filled with, gunpowder, and it's like and none of it. I mean, it was nice to have some of the information, but they really didn't give us anything. And we were needing to invent it on the fly. And so not only were we at the disadvantage of trying to figure this all out, but we were also trying to navigate exactly what you're talking about of we're trying to invent this. We're also trying to navigate the, your own Marines when you do have, when you're in leadership. And then you're also trying to manage your own shit. You're, keeping yourself, to that higher echelon of proactiveness, higher echelon of reasonability. I remember something happened. I don't remember exactly, but Gunny Cook said something to me after a mission, and it changed. Fortunately, he said it was early on, and he said, "Make sure that you remember you have the dogs of war on a leash, and don't let out more leash than you can handle, because if they get away from you, you can't pull the leash back." And I mean, it was a critique because I don't know exactly what had happened. Doesn't really matter. But I think he sensed that I was a little too lax with my, letting the guys get a little too angry with what had happened. I think it was right after, I do know what had happened. It was after Worth got hit. And we were getting rocks thrown at us by a crowd. And
so that was March 20th when Worth got hit by that bike IED?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That took out his eye, right?
I'm sorry?
It took out his eye.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where's he at nowadays?
Last I heard, he was in Ohio, ? I reached out to him several years ago. I need to do it again.
Yeah, he's not on socials, right? Because I've looked.
I have not. Yeah, I have not seen him. Haven't been able to reach out with him or keep in touch with him at all, unfortunately.
Yeah,
I still have one of his DVDs, and every time I see it, I feel bad that I never got it back to him. His name's actually on it, and I'm like, God, I need it.
I owe you.
I should have returned that.
Yeah, I think that was our first. Oh, bad connection here. Who is that? Is that me?
It's all right. Go ahead. You froze for a second, but it's okay. You can say it again. I can clip it.
No, I was asking. I think Worth was our first weapons company casualty, wasn't it?
The first wounded?
Yeah.
No, he was not the first wounded.
Who was it?
That's a good question. I don't know, but I was wounded before Worth was. I was wounded on the 18th, and Worth was wounded on the 20th. But I think someone got hit, and Stadelman seemed to think it was minor, but I don't know that it was minor. But someone caught shrapnel on the way up from Kuwait from an IED.
Yeah, I thought that was Worth.
That was not Worth.
No,
Worth was on the 20th. We came up from Kuwait on March 6th.
Mm.
I have the fortune of having looked up all these dates, so I've got a timeline sort of scribbled down. Actually, it makes it easier for me to keep in sort of in.
Were you a part of the convoy going up,
No.
or did you come with everybody else later?
Yeah, we off a C-130, I think it was.
I was
Late
going to
at
ask, like, how did you guys get up? Because Nylan and I were part of the convoy that
night.
drove from Kuwait to Ramadi.
So this thing was
Oh,
a shit. Um, shit, like a funny story shit show.
I'm actually really excited about this because I don't know any of this story. Like,
yeah.
like once we left Camp Victory,
Hmm.
and then when you guys showed up a few days later, I have no idea what happened in between then.
Yeah, same. I
So
just remember the 7 tons picking you up.
the core memory I have around that movement was we're in a C-130 and it's late at night, like 2 o'clock in the morning or something. And it's cold, right? And there's no
It
insulation,
was.
right? So it's freaking freezing in the things. And we're in full combat gear, and we're about to land to wherever it was, Sod, or I don't
Probably
remember.
Al Assad, I'd imagine. That was the closest big air base that would land a C-130.
And this freaking bird starts to climb and climb, and I'm talking about a steep climb. And nobody gave us a heads up that this is proper procedure. When you're coming into a combat.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this thing is at a 45-degree angle, and we're picking up and we're picking up and we're picking up and we're coming. It gets colder and colder and colder, and then this motherfucker drops at
Oh, he did a
45.
combat dive in.
Oh my
Fuck.
gosh! Oh, everybody in there was like like a freaking roller coaster. Oh, like everybody like grabbing each other, like what the hell's going on? We just got shot.
Uh,
And then right before we land, this he levels out, and not too much longer, where you could feel it land, and I was like, these fucking douchebags, warn somebody. But yeah, that was our experience flying in. Yeah. So to the pilots, screw you.
No, I don't remember who it was. It was somebody on ship when we were on the Essex, and we had been down in the belly for forever. And I remember saying, I can't remember who it was. It was a staff NCO, and I was like, why are they doing this to us? And they said they torture Marines to make sure that you don't want to go back to ship in case there's a war, because they want to make sure that no matter how bad it is in war, no
Yeah,
matter like you don't want to even think about what
right. The
peace
typical
felt like.
ship life.
Uh, Now,
I
were
want to.
you a part of the stay behind key leadership at the end?
I was not. Nope.
No. Okay.
Were
Yes,
you?
yeah, you were. You were there for the left seat, right seats at the end.
Was I? Oh yeah, you're right, because that there was an IED that hurt 2.5. Was 2.5 and that
That
really
was my truck. Almost killed me.
was
Yeah,
it yours? Yeah,
he
that was
got
Yeah, it was
hit
an
by an RPG. Diaz got hit by a mortar.
yeah.
somebody
Multiple.
got burnt on the side of the face with.
That was Captain Rapicult. That was
Yeah.
actually earlier than the left seat, right seats. When did he get burned? I've actually got that written down too, just because of this particular conversation. That was July. July was when that guy got burned.
Mm.
But September 12th, 11th, and 12th were the left seat, right seats for key leaders before when we sent all the platoons back. And the reason why I know you were there is because I remember specifically we almost all died on the 12th with the mass uprising and all of the ambushes on the
Government
trucks.
center.
Yeah, at the government center. And we
Mhm.
drove back under fire. I don't know about you, but a lot of everybody that I was attached to was shooting out of the trucks essentially to keep people from overthrowing the trucks.
Right.
We got back to Hurricane Point, and that was when they had the mass rush on the snake pit and the front gate of Hurricane Point. And right after all of that, I walked over and you were sitting in the smoke pit, and I sat right next to you. I think it was the only time I had ever seen you smoke a cigarette ever. I don't know if you smoked at that time, but you did that day. And you had just pulled a cigarette out, and I grabbed my sweaty bullshit cigarette pack out of my gear and pulled out a cigarette. And I looked at you and I said, Garcia, I am so sorry for anything I have ever said about 81's platoon. You guys are amazing.
Mm.
And these guys are the biggest fucking bunch of idiots I've ever met in my life. And I hope we never go out again. And we didn't. Major Harold called it, and they brought a 7-ton over and picked us up and took us over to Camp Ramadi.
Mm.
And you were laughing your ass off. And you're like, it's okay, man. You're like, patting me on the back. I was like, I don't know what the fuck we just witnessed, but that was not, none of that was organized.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and Ramadi, that many times with this shit show. 100%. Yeah. That's, so in the book, Unremitting, it covers an ambush. It glosses over an ambush that specifically talks about Jeremiah Savage. So we were QRF. I don't remember what number, but it was heavy out there, and we drive out of Hurricane Point. We made a right somewhere, and then and we're trucking through the city, right? Because we're trying to get to whoever is locked up in combat in a firefight. And we make this left, and as we make this left, we get two Humvees. I'm in the second. Jeremiah, Lieutenant Dobbin, them, Regal Spurker are on their first vehicle. I think Lewis Layton was in the vehicle behind me. Maybe Dahl was the fourth driver. I don't remember. But man, as soon as we take that left turn, it was contact left. So, and we make a left turn, it was contact left, and all the vehicles stop. Everybody's screaming contact left. Everybody gets out the vehicle, and to the left there's this grave, and the grave is protected by 8-foot like gate fencing or another.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremiah opens up. There's people in this grave. The enemy or whatever.
And you guys were taking small arms fire, like AKs and RPK type fire, or
AKs and medium machine guns.
Yeah.
From a very close range, probably like 20 feet. Very wild and very vicious. And we ended up scaling this fence. We jump over the fence. We're running up on the enemy. We're dropping bodies. We get to this wall because it was fencing, about 25, 30 feet worth of graves, about 3 or 4, and I don't want to say the incorrect term, but bad guys. There's machine guns and AKs on the ground, and I look at, and I'm going to say his name because we spoke about this before. We get to this wall, and I'm like, Hersher, scale the wall. He's like, I'm not fucking scaling the wall. I'm like, fuck it, I'll scale the wall, right? So I scaled the wall, right? Because we're pushing through. We're pushing through. We don't know how deep is. We're pushing through. Contact left. We engage the enemy. The enemy's dead. We're pushing through this wall and going to figure out what's
make sure there's nothing on the other side.
100%. And so I scale the wall by myself, right? I scale the wall. When I land, I'm in this intersection as far as you can see, in the middle of an intersection as far as you can see. And then there's a street as far as you can see, see. And I'm like, this was a fucking bonehead move. This was dumb. Like Hershey was right to say, I'm not scaling that wall. I ain't doing it. Crazy. But luckily enough, there was no contact after that wall. But there was a vehicle parked behind the wall, and the trunk was open, and it was ammo for days. And we ended up, shooting, the engine block to make sure that vehicle couldn't be used again. And did a quick look, and then we got back on our trucks and went out to what we were called to do for that day.
How many enemy do you think were in the ambush?
4 or 5, I would say. Enough to fit in that vehicle.
If you like what you've heard, this is a multi-part episode. Make sure you listen to the rest of the story.